900 aliens just voted to exile humanity forever. The room was celebrating, relief on every face, except one. Earth's ambassador sat perfectly still, not because she was defeated, because everything was going exactly according to plan. They called it the Galactic community. Oldest power structure in the known universe. 900 delegates deciding who belongs. Earth spent 40 years knocking. Today they bolted the door shut. Her hands were steady. But her mother died waiting for this system to say yes. 14 years filling out forms at a kitchen table. Buried without an answer. That changes a person. 47 relay stations built in silence. 8 years. Every trade route. Every supply chain. Every military channel. Running through hardware they never noticed. Now the alarms are going off. Lawyers scrambling. Generals shouting. She walks to the center of the chamber, places a single chip on the table. We're done asking. I stopped counting at 412, not because I lost track, because the number already crossed the line I calculated 8 months ago. Sitting in a hotel room on Velcar Prime, eating something that tasted like wet cardboard and smelled like engine fluid, the night I understood this moment was coming, and that nothing I said in this chamber would change its direction. 612 civilizations represented in this room. 900 delegates packed into a structure that smelled like a tide pool, baking in the sun. I'd been sitting in the exact seat for 3 years. Knew which atmospheric scrubbers were broken. East wall. Always the east wall. Knew which delegate from the OSIC hegemony took bathroom breaks during critical votes. He didn't take one today. My name is Lena Hartwell, Earth's ambassador to the Galactic community, a title that sounds significant until you understand what it actually means. It means you sit at a table engineered for everyone except you. It means you file petitions that vanish into review periods measured in years. It means you stand before 600 civilizations and represent 8 billion people to a body that has spent 4 decades deciding whether humanity qualifies for the paperwork. Today they reached their conclusion. Chief Arbiter Sunva read the charges. Careful, measured, voice of someone who practiced sounding reluctant. Earth's militarization rate, never precisely defined, consistently cited. Our refusal to submit biotech research to council oversight, research we offered to share, but not surrender the incident at Meridian Station, which 3 separate civilizations filed formal trauma complaints about, and which the official record described in language constructed so carefully that no individual or governing body would ever be held specifically accountable for what actually happened there. I hadn't requested speaking time. Everything I needed to say I'd already said. 12 years. 407 formally filed objections. 219 diplomatic correspondence chains reviewed, acknowledged, placed into the institutional equivalent of a drawer no one opened. I'd said all of it, through the correct channels, in the correct language, with the appropriate documentation attached and verified. It produced the vote I was watching now. The indicator lights above each delegation seat shifted from neutral to amber. Amber spread the way damage spreads, starting at center, moving outward, until it occupied more of the room than anything else. 400, 500, 560. I didn't lean forward, didn't grip the arms of my chair, sat with the stillness that doesn't come from calm, comes from knowing exactly what you do next. 612. The single abstention was the Breath Collective, who abstained from everything as a matter of philosophy. I once asked their senior delegate whether the Breath ever voted yes on anything. He told me the Breath believed certainty was a form of arrogance. I told him that was a comfortable philosophical position for a species that didn't need other civilizations' votes to survive. He hadn't spoken to me directly since. The cost of that had been 0. Chief Arbiter Sunva held the result for 4 full seconds before reading it aloud. Theatrical choice. The Velcari were good at theatrical. The motion carries. Earth is formally placed under protective isolation. Trade sanctions will take effect within 1 standard cycle. Travel restrictions are immediate. A corrective period of no less than 50 standard cycles is hereby imposed. 50 cycles. The chamber released a collective sound that traveled through 900 bodies in 900 different ways, a loosening, A settling. Whatever relief sounds like when you translate it across a dozen physiologies at once. The Valkyrie legal team was already moving documents. The OS delegation communicated through low-frequency vibrations their species uses when they don't want the conversation followed. I pulled out my tablet. The delegate closest to me glanced over. Young Valkyrie. Wide light-capturing eyes, his species develops for deep space navigation. I felt what he was expecting. A protest, an emergency motion. Some visible response that would confirm for everyone present that the vote landed with the weight the chamber intended. I typed 11 words into a secure channel. Green light. All nodes confirm receipt and report status. Sent. Looked up at the young delegate. He looked away. The diplomatic liaison assigned to manage Earth's formal exit from the community reached me 2 minutes after the vote closed. Senior Valkyrie official. Face built for difficult conversations. The kind of face that develops in people whose job is to deliver outcomes that damage others, while maintaining the impression that the damage is regrettable and ultimately in everyone's interest. He began a prepared statement about transition support resources, liaison offices, a community-funded adjustment period for Earth's economy. I closed my tablet. Here's the thing. You just voted to exile a species that has been building a separate table for 8 years, held that in the space between us. You didn't exile us. You freed us from the waiting list. The prepared statement left his face completely. What replaced it was a calculation. The visible, specific recalculation of a person who just discovered that the map they were carrying doesn't describe the terrain they're standing in. My tablet pulsed once, short. Confirmed. All 47 nodes active and clean. Petra read it, closed the screen, stood up. The chamber continued behind me. 900 conversations about what came next for Earth, none of which included any input from Earth. The amber lights had returned to their neutral blue. But the room felt amber anyway. Something in the air pressure, something in the weight of all that relief pressing outward toward the walls. I walked toward the exit. 200 feet of polished stone, sourced from a quarry on a planet I'd never visited. My footsteps made no sound. The Valkyrie designed this building to make visitors feel the weight of its age, to make them feel small inside something vast and permanent and far older than they were. I'd always found the effect somewhat overstated. Didn't look back at the chamber, nothing behind me I hadn't already planned for. In the corridor outside, the air was cleaner. Direct, the escort caught up with me at the first junction. 6 Valkyrie reinforcement officers with the practiced formation of people who believed they were performing containment. Their lead officer informed me with genuine courtesy that Earth's diplomatic credentials had been suspended effective immediately, and that he was authorized to ensure my orderly departure from community facilities. Copy that. Kept walking. They kept pace. Believed they were escorting me out. They were not. The corridor that led from the convocation chamber to the transit hub was 400 meters long, designed to feel longer. The Valkyrie architects had done something subtle with the ceiling. It dropped incrementally as you walked, creating us a subconscious sense of compression, of available space narrowing with each step. The psychology of it was probably quite effective on species that experience spatial pressure as emotional pressure. I'd measured the ceiling drop on my 3rd week in this building, filed it away. I file most things away. The escort maintained their formation. 3 paces behind on each side, standard. Polite, their lead officer had the careful body language of someone briefed that the subject might be volatile. Visibly relieved to find her walking in a straight line without incident. I was simply walking in a straight line. The incident was elsewhere. My comms were receiving everything. 26 messages since the vote closed. Sol Command. Earth's relay station. 2 news organizations that shouldn't have had this channel but did, because they always find a way. Owen Hart, my legal advisor. Preview read as expected. Standing by. Director Neil Sutton, from Earth's Foreign Affairs Office. Preview read, Lena, what is happening? Which told me the relay data was already moving. Word traveling ahead of the official announcement. I opened one message, Petra Wells. Short, all 47 active. 0 interference. 0 flags from community monitoring. They haven't noticed yet. How long do we have? Typed back, long enough. Here is what the galactic community understood about Earth as of 15 minutes ago. We were a capable species with a notable military development curve, a persistent refusal to accept multilateral oversight of our research programs, a history of handling disagreements more directly than the community's conflict resolution protocols preferred. A problem, a stubborn one, the kind you eventually quarantine and correct. Here is what they didn't understand about Earth. We had spent 16 years studying how the infrastructure of their civilization actually held together. And we had spent 8 years building a layer of it that we controlled. The galactic community's deep space relay network was old. The oldest sections had been in operation for over 4 centuries, maintained initially by the Valkyrie, then delegated across generations into a structure of contracts and subcontracts and automated maintenance systems that no single entity fully understood anymore. The Valkyrie knew their sections, the OSIC knew the junctions their trade depended on. The Breath monitored their own communication corridor. No one possessed a complete map of the whole. We had built one. 16 years of mapping, every corridor, every junction, every traffic pattern and redundancy gap and aging component in the network. We had identified 47 specific intersections, the points where the highest volume of interstellar trade and communication crossed. And we had built new relay nodes at each one, in open interstellar space, which fell under no jurisdiction, rested under the community's own standard infrastructure classification system, where they appeared in the directories as generic relay additions, unattributed, unremarkable, completely overlooked. It violated no law on record, because the laws on record were written when humanity was still developing its first FTL drive. No one had thought to prohibit this specific thing, because no one had imagined a species doing it quietly over 8 years without once announcing the intention. We had imagined it, we had done it. And 20 minutes ago we had turned it on. My comms open. Hank Briggs at sole command. Answered, tell me it's clean, no greeting. Hank never wasted time on greetings, Petra confirmed it. 47 nodes. No flags yet, window? Enough. They're recalling me to the chamber now. A pause. Short, Hank absorbed information the way good commanders do. Completely. Without performing the process. You ready for that room again? Thought about the chamber. The amber lights across 612 delegation seats, the sound of 900 bodies releasing tension they'd been holding since Earth's application went into its 4th decade of review. Sunva's rehearsed reluctance. 50 cycles, protective isolation. I've been ready for that room for 12 years, heard him exhale, not relief. The specific breath of a person who has been waiting a long time for something to either work or fail. And who knows even now that it's not fully decided yet. Lena. Your mother would have. Copy that. Ended the call. My mother petitioned for Earth's full community membership in 2089, spent 14 years navigating the process, filing, attending consultations, translating the community's procedural language into something humans could respond to, then translating humanity's responses back into something the community would accept. She did it with the patience of someone who genuinely believed that if you built the right argument and presented it through the right channels and demonstrated clearly that you deserved to be included, the system would respond to that the system was, at its core, designed to respond to that. She died in 2107, still processing. I hadn't become a diplomat because I believed in the process. I'd become a diplomat because I understood it. There is a significant difference between those two things. One is faith, the other is reconnaissance. The escort slowed at a secondary corridor junction, the lead officer's comms unit activated. He listened, something reorganized in his posture. Not alarm, but the specific adjustment of a person receiving information that changes the parameters of their current assignment. Turned to me. Ambassador Hartwell. The convocation has issued an emergency recall. Chief Arbiter Sunva has requested your immediate return to the chamber. The stated basis is an infrastructure concern. Infrastructure concern? Yes, looked at him for a moment. He was doing his job correctly, and he clearly felt the situation had moved past what his job had prepared him for. which was not something I held against him. Copy that. Turned around, walked back toward the chamber. The escort, which had been absolutely certain 12 minutes ago that they were escorting me out, reformed, without a word, moved with me in the opposite direction. Gave them credit for the professionalism. As I walked, I thought about Petra Wells, 29 years old, standing in front of Earth's Foreign Affairs Committee, presenting the node concept, watching the committee use the word ambitious in the specific way that institutions use it when they mean this will not be funded. She'd gone back to her lab with 7 people and a budget that wouldn't have covered the catering at one of the community's annual summary conferences. 8 years later, she sent me 2 words. It's ready. I'd read those 2 words at my desk in the community facility I was no longer allowed to call home. Sitting in the quiet of a late orbital evening, and I'd felt something I'd been careful not to name. Currency you haven't confirmed is real shouldn't be spent. I'd filed the feeling away with everything else I was carrying. The chamber doors were ahead. The first time I walked through them, I'd been carrying 40 years of Earth's patience on a structure that had been fracturing for a long time. This time I was carrying terms. The chamber looked different on re-entry, not physically. The stone was the same stone, the ceiling the same calculated height, the broken atmospheric scrubbers on the east wall still broken, but 900 bodies that had settled into the comfortable weight of a concluded decision had reorganized into something considerably less comfortable. Delegates had moved into clusters that hadn't existed before I left. Conversations that had been running at the relaxed pace of business concluded now moved fast and low and close. I knew that pace. I'd seen it in briefing rooms before outcomes changed. Chief Arbiter Sunva was standing. He didn't stand during sessions that were not in formal record. Standing was reserved for moments that required visible gravity. I walked to the center floor, not to the ambassador's bench, which was technically no longer my seat. To the speaker's position, the raised section slightly elevated from the chamber floor. Designed so that when a delegate addressed the full chamber, every delegation could see them clearly. I stood on it. Sunva looked at me for 2 full seconds without speaking. His expression held the particular arrangement a Velkari elder shows when they're aware that the expected shape of a situation has not materialized. Ambassador Hartwell, our infrastructure monitoring has flagged a significant anomaly across the deep space relay network. 47 new relay nodes have registered active status in the major trade corridors. The authentication layer on 11 primary junctions has been redirected through Earth-registered infrastructure. We are requesting an explanation. Sure. Earth built 47 relay nodes over 8 years in open interstellar space. Registered them under your standard infrastructure classification system. Activated them approximately 25 minutes ago. The chamber was very quiet. The Velkaric pharmaceutical distribution network routes through Corridor 7. Our node at that junction is now the primary authentication point for all traffic on that route. Continued. The OSIC hegemony's commercial shipping depends on junctions 2, 9, and 14. We have operational nodes at all 3. Let that settle. The Breath Collective's communication network runs through the central hub at Sector 40. Our node there is the most powerful unit in that zone by a factor of 3. Look directly at the Breath delegation. They didn't abstain from listening. The Myriad Strands data relay uses junctions 21 and 32. We cover both. Turn to the Ahan Trade Federation representatives. The Ahan Trade Federation's primary cargo corridor runs through junction 18. Our node there went live clean, then looked at the Velkari Commercial Committee representatives, who had arrived in the last 12 minutes, fast enough that several were still arranging their seating. None of this violates any law currently on the community registry. Earth's legal team has verified the full construction and registration record against every applicable statute in your existing framework. All 47 nodes meet community infrastructure classification standards. All were built and registered within current interstellar property protocols. Repaused, there is no legal mechanism available to this chamber to compel Earth to disable, surrender, or transfer operation of those nodes. Let that sentence reach every corner of the room before I continued. Owen Hart was near the chamber entrance. He'd arrived at some point in the last few minutes. Jacket slightly crooked. Tablet already open, the expression of a man who had been preparing for a specific moment for 3 years, and was now standing fully inside it. He raised 2 fingers. Confirmed. Owen Hart, Earth's chief legal advisor, has the complete regulatory record available, and is prepared to review it with any legal scholars this chamber wishes to appoint. The record will support everything I have just told you. The O6 senior delegate produced a low, resonant sound his species makes when confronting information they hadn't prepared for. It traveled through the room. The Valkyrie commercial representatives were clearly receiving communications from their home offices. I could read the reorganization in their body language as the responses arrived. The specific recalibration of institutions calculating the cost of 2 different outcomes against each other. Sunva set his tablet down with great care. Ambassador Hartwell. What is Earth proposing? Earth is not proposing anything. Reached into my jacket pocket. Removed a data chip. Walked to the arbiter's table. Placed it in front of him. Earth is delivering terms. The distinction matters. I would ask this chamber to keep it in mind throughout the rest of this conversation. Stepped back to the speaker's floor. For 40 years, Earth operated within the community's framework. We filed petitions. We attended reviews. We modified our research disclosure practices on 3 separate occasions, each time based on assurances that modifications would advance our membership application. Repaused, they did not advance it. Let that sit. We submitted to 2 independent security assessments, conducted by community-appointed teams, both of which cleared Earth of the specific concerns cited in this morning's vote. Looked across the full chamber. Those assessments were classified. They were never entered into the formal record. Waited. At no point in 40 years did this body treat Earth as a civilization with legitimate standing. We were processed. We were reviewed. We were told our concerns had been noted and that the process would continue. Another pause. Today that arrangement ends. Nodded toward the data chip. The file contains Earth's terms. They are complete, and they are not modular. Began listing. Earth's relay nodes remain under Earth's operation, with licensing agreements for continued access available at rates defined in Appendix 2, Earth's permanent arbiter seat on this council, with full voting rights. Effective immediately upon agreement, the incident at Meridian Station is to be officially reclassified in the community record to reflect what actually occurred. Earth's biotech research program continues under Earth's own oversight framework, with voluntary disclosure provisions outlined in Appendix 5. Stop. Section 3 addresses the suppressed security assessment report. I would strongly suggest reading Section 3 before formulating a response. The chamber was silent for 4 seconds. Then it was not silent at all. Sunva called a 30-minute recess. When the session resumed, 7 additional Valkyrie legal scholars were seated at the arbiter's table, plus 2 representatives from the Community Standards Authority, a body that existed, as far as I had ever been able to determine, primarily to generate documentation confirming that existing standards applied to whatever situation was currently in dispute. The senior legal scholar opened with the full framework argument, systematic, structured, well-prepared. He used 14 minutes, covered precedent, historical context, and the position that Earth's node construction, while not explicitly prohibited under current interstellar property statute, potentially violated the spirit of the community's infrastructure cooperation framework. The spirit of the framework waited until he finished completely. The spirit of the framework was written 2 centuries ago by species who had not yet made first contact with Earth. Earth was not consulted on the spirit of the framework. Earth was not consulted on any of the foundational documents your team is currently citing. Repaused. We were presented with documents as conditions of a membership application that, as of this morning, has produced no membership after 40 years of active processing. Looked at Owen. He stepped forward, placed a physical document in front of the senior scholar, then another, Then 6 more, precisely stacked, legal analysis of every precedent cited, with specific annotation to the sections that do not apply to Earth's construction activities, because Earth was not a signatory to the originating agreements. All verified and timestamped. Owen's voice was even. Professional. The third document in that stack references Section 19 of the community's own Infrastructure Development Charter, which provides direct positive legal support for independent node construction in open interstellar space, not subject to any existing territorial claim. The senior scholar looked at the stack of documents, looked at Owen, looked at the documents again. Owen returned to his position near the wall, picked up his coffee, and stared at the middle distance with the expression of a man running on very little sleep and the very specific energy that comes from doing work you have been building toward for 3 years and have finally been given permission to do in front of the people it was designed for. The legal argument ended. The OTSIC delegate introduced their threat. 17 minutes. Their senior delegate stood. His statement, rendered through the chamber's translation relay, described Earth's node activation as a destabilizing action that posed a direct threat to the security of its interstellar infrastructure, and noted that the OSIC hegemony maintained enforcement capabilities sufficient to address infrastructure threats of this nature under current community emergency security protocols. He framed it carefully as a statement of capability and legal authority, not as a declaration. He sat down. The chamber waited, reached into my jacket pocket, opened a specific file on my personal comm unit, pressed play. The audio lasted 12 seconds, 2 voices, clear recording, speaking in OSIC, translated in real time by the chamber's universal relay system for every delegation present. A conversation between 2 senior OSIC military officers, discussing the approach vector of an Earth survey vessel near the Meridian Station sector, the decision to initiate a boarding action on an unarmed civilian research craft, and the escalation that followed, which the officers described as having proceeded according to plan. 12 seconds. Stop the playback. Full recording is 47 minutes. Earth has held it for 6 years. It currently exists on 7 separate servers across 3 solar systems. Let that information settle into the room. Section 4 of Earth's terms addresses the official record correction for the Meridian Station incident. I would recommend reviewing Section 4 carefully before this delegation makes any additional statements. This OSIC senior delegate was completely still, the specific, deliberate stillness of a large, physically expressive species choosing, with considerable effort, not to express anything at all. He made no further statement. The Valkyrie commercial representatives had received communications from their home offices during the recess, and the responses had reorganized their body language in a way that was not difficult to read. The message that had come back was some form of "do not disconnect the nodes." Their own supply chain mathematics had spoken more directly than any position paper could. Turned back to Suinva, the terms are complete. I am willing to clarify any section whose language requires it. That is different from modification, and I want to be precise about that difference. Sunva looked at me with the particular expression of a person who runs an institution that is currently being required to adapt faster than its design permits. From the back of the chamber, a voice asked for the floor. A young Valkyrie delegate, outer system delegation, not the core authority. Young for a Valkyrie. Wide-eyed in the way that species only is when something has genuinely caught them without preparation, Sunva granted the floor. The delegate looked at me directly. Why did you not simply ask for this? All of it years ago, before all of this became necessary. The chamber was quiet, looked at him for a long moment. Thought about 219 correspondence chains that went into drawers. Thought about 2 security assessment reports, cleared for return of membership application. And then, classified from the formal record, thought about a 47-minute audio recording held for 6 years. Because the official documentation of what happened at Meridian Station described it as a navigational misunderstanding. Thought about a woman filling in boxes on a form at a kitchen table. believing in the right process with the specific faith of someone who cannot afford to believe that the process was never designed to let them through. We did ask. We asked for 30 years, held his gaze. Then we stopped asking. The young delegate looked at me, then he looked down. He didn't speak again. 12 years ago, I walked into this chamber for the first time, age 33. First day, as Earth's official representative, I'd spent the previous night reviewing floor plans, delegation seating arrangements, historical voting patterns on applications similar to Earth's, which meant applications that never passed. My predecessor had left me a single note: be patient, they respect patience. I threw it away. Spent my first week measuring things. The ceiling dropped 3.2 centimeters every 50 meters, calculated to compress perception without triggering conscious awareness. The atmospheric scrubbers on the east wall cycled at 68% efficiency, creating a subtle staleness that made extended sessions uncomfortable. The stone floor was sourced from Valkyrie Prime, chosen specifically because its density carried sound poorly, made footsteps disappear, made individuals feel less substantial. I documented all of it, filed it under things that told me exactly what this place was designed to do: make you small, make you wait, make you believe that waiting was respect. My mother spent 14 years in this system. Eleanor Hartwell, physicist, diplomat. Believer, she filed Earth's first formal application in 2089. I was 11. I watched her at the kitchen table, filling in form, attaching documentation, cross-referencing treaty language with Earth legal frameworks. She did it with the focus of someone building something that mattered, because to her, it did matter. The community represented everything she believed civilization could be, should be. A structure where different species found common ground, where disputes were resolved through process instead of force, where membership was earned through demonstration of shared values. She believed in that, spent 14 years proving Earth qualified, attended consultations on Valkyrie Prime, submitted to review boards, answered the same questions in slightly different configurations across 147 formal sessions. Each time they told her the process was advancing. Each time they filed her work into another review cycle. She died in 2107, 62 years old, still waiting for a final determination. I was there when she received the notification that Earth's application had been moved into its 4th decade of assessment. She smiled. They're being thorough. That's good. It means they're taking us seriously. I was 24. Already understood that thorough and serious were words institutions used when they meant indefinite. But I didn't tell her that. Let her keep believing. Because what else do you give someone who has spent 14 years of their life on a structure that will never hold weight? She had a stroke 3 months later. Died in a hospital in Geneva. Last thing she said to me: keep believing in the process, darling. It works. You just have to give it time. I held her hand, didn't correct her, let her die believing the system she'd served would eventually serve her back. I became a diplomat 6 months later, not because I believed what my mother believed, because I needed to understand exactly how the system worked, so I could break it correctly. Stood in this chamber on my first day, counted delegates, measured ceiling drops, noted broken scrubbers, and calculated how long it would take to build leverage the community couldn't ignore. Answer was 8 years. If we started immediately, if we worked quietly, if we violated no laws while building the foundation their entire infrastructure sat on. Met with Petra Wells 2 weeks later. She was 29 then. Brilliant, impatient with bureaucracy. Had already mapped 40% of the relay network on her own time using publicly available traffic data. I asked if she could map the rest. Give me funding and I'll map every junction in the system. No funding. You'll have 7 people. Budget that won't cover your coffee habit. And you'll need to do it while maintaining appearances that you're working on approved projects. She looked at me for 10 seconds. How long do I have? 8 years. Maybe 9 if you need it. What happens in 8 years? We activate. Activate what? Relay nodes. 47 of them, at every critical junction we identify. Built in open space, registered legally. Completely overlooked until we turn them on. She didn't blink. That's passive, aggressive infrastructure project I've ever heard. Yes, I'm in. We shook hands. She went back to her lab. I went back to the chamber, filed my first petition, knowing it would go nowhere, but needing it on record that I'd asked, because when we stopped asking, I wanted the documentation to show exactly how long we'd tried their way first. 3 years into the node construction, something happened. Young Valkyrie analyst named Lyra Ken discovered an anomaly in the relay network traffic patterns. Junction 14, slight increase in electromagnetic signatures. Consistent with new hardware installation. She brought it to her supervisor. He reviewed her data for 6 minutes. Probably automated maintenance protocols. The network self-repairs. Don't waste analysis time on background noise. Lyra looked uncertain. The signature doesn't match standard maintenance frequencies. Then it's a civilian contractor. Someone upgraded their relay equipment. It happens. File it and move on. She filed it, moved on. I didn't know about this until 3 years later, after the second vote. When Lyra requested a private meeting, showed me the original report. I should have pushed harder. I almost caught you in year 3. If I'd investigated instead of filing it away, I looked at the data. She'd been close. Another week of analysis, and she would have identified the pattern. Realized it wasn't one junction, it was 47. You did your job correctly. Your supervisor made the call. And honestly, if you'd caught us then, we probably would have accelerated the timeline. Activated early. It would have been messier, but we'd already built 20 nodes by that point. The outcome would have been the same. She processed that. You had contingencies. We had contingencies for every scenario we could model, including discovery at year 3. What was the contingency? Activate what we had. Deliver modified terms. Except that we'd have less leverage. But still more than we'd had before. She looked at me. You were never going to stop? No, pause. My mother stopped. It killed her. Slowly, over 14 years. I watched the system do that to her. I wasn't going to let it do that to Earth. Lyra joined my staff 2 months later. Licensed between Earth and Valkyrie technical committees. Best hire I ever made, because she understood exactly how close things can come to different outcomes. And she never filed anything away again without investigating it completely. But that was later, in the chamber, watching Sunva process Earth's terms. I thought about my mother. Wondered what she would think of this moment, whether she'd be proud or disappointed that I'd abandoned the process she believed in, decided it didn't matter. She was dead, I was here, and the process she'd believed in had never been designed to work. Sunva called for the vote 43 minutes later. No further legal challenges were raised, no additional statements from the OSIC delegation. The vote moved through the chamber species by species, but the indicator lights above the delegation seats shifted to blue this time. Not amber blue, meaning affirmative, meaning acceptance. I watched the blue spread started at the outer delegations, species who had less investment in the existing power structure, species who saw Earth's nodes as potential alternative to Valkyrie OSIC infrastructure dominance. Then moved inward. The Valkyrie commercial interests voted blue because their supply chains depended on nodes they no longer controlled. The OSIC voted blue because the alternative was confrontation with a species that had just demonstrated it could build critical infrastructure while everyone was looking elsewhere. And because we had 47 minutes of audio recording that would destroy their official narrative about Meridian Station, the Breath Collective abstained. As expected, certainty is arrogance. 10 other delegations abstained. Smaller species caught between established relationships and new calculations. I didn't hold it against them. 601 civilizations voted blue, 11 abstentions. Zell opposing votes, 1 modification to Appendix 2. Owen had agreed to it mid-session. I'd reviewed and approved during the recess. Minor adjustment to licensing fee structures for relay access gave the Valkyrie commercial sector a graduated implementation timeline. Cost Earth nothing. Gave them political cover. Let them tell their constituents they'd negotiated. I stood on the speaker's floor, watched 601 blue lights, felt something move through me. Something I had no intention of naming in a room with 900 observers, noted it, filed it, would carry it the way I carried everything else, below the operational layer where it wouldn't interfere with work. Thank you. Accurate. That's all the words needed to be. Step down. Owen was near the exit. Handed me coffee without speaking, cold. Drank it without comment. We walked into the corridor, held up one hand. He stopped beside me, stayed still for 11 seconds. Then straightened. Opened comms. Hank answered on the second pulse. Done. Pause. How does it feel? Thought about it. Like winning an argument with someone who ran over your dog 6 years ago and wrote the incident report themselves. Pause on his end. Yeah. That sounds about right. Ended the call. Owen looked at me. What now? Now we do the work we just earned the right to do, which is everything my mother wanted to do. Except we do it from a seat they can't take away. He nodded. We walked. There was work to do. There is always work to do. 90 days later, I was in the middle of a trade mediation, a Han Federation versus Valkyrie commercial consortium, dispute over corridor access fees. Both sides had legitimate arguments. Both sides had been negotiating for 11 months without resolution. Community's standard mediation protocols had failed. 3 times, they requested Earth arbitration, specifically requested me, which was new. 6 weeks earlier, they wouldn't have accepted human arbitration in any capacity. The Han representative made his case. Corridor access fees had increased 40% over 3 years, without corresponding improvements in service quality, without consultation with the primary users of those corridors. The Valkyrie consortium countered. Maintenance costs had increased. Security requirements had expanded. The fee structure reflected actual operational expenses. Both arguments were reasonable. Both missed the actual problem, which was that the fee structure tied revenue to volume, meaning the Valkyrie consortium profited more when traffic increased, but bore no cost when traffic decreased, creating asymmetric risk. The Han bore all downside, the Valkyrie bore none. I let them argue for 40 minutes, then stopped them. You're negotiating fee percentages. That's not the problem. The problem is risk allocation. The Valkyrie profit from volume increases, but don't share cost of volume decreases. The Han accept all market risk, while the Valkyrie accept none. That structure produced sustainable agreement. Both sides went quiet. Here's an alternative framework developed on Earth for multi-party industrial zones, shared resource stewardship model. Both parties invest in infrastructure maintenance. Both parties share operational costs proportionally. Revenue splits based on actual usage. Risk is symmetric. Pulled up the framework documentation, walked them through the structure. 20 minutes later, both sides agreed to a provisional implementation. Pilot program, 90 days, review and adjust. They left with the particular energy of people who arrived expecting a longer fight, and discovered there was a different corridor they hadn't seen. After the chamber cleared, the OSIC delegate crossed the floor, stopped at 2 meters, the standard OSIC interaction distance. Deliberate choice on his part. Your people argue like you expect to lose. Considered that, not an insult. The OS communicate through direct observation. They name what they see. The naming is the communication itself. Yeah, habit. He looked at me for another moment. Then he laughed deep, resonant, the sound his species makes when something genuinely surprises them. Walked away still laughing. I carried that observation longer than the corridor required. We argue like people who have been losing and learn to be precise about it anyway. We argue like lawyers who built every case from secondary sources because the primary sources were never made available. We argue the way you argue when you know you're right, but the available channels were not designed to confirm you. All of those things were true, and they were the same observation, arriving from different angles. Petra came to the station on day 64, didn't travel often, had a lab, a team. The kind of focus that experiences transit time as hours removed from productive work. When she appeared at the receiving hub with a bag over one shoulder and the specific compressed look, someone who had been in a transport pod for 30 hours straight, I understood the visit was not casual. We ate in the station cafeteria. The food had improved, since I'd taken the arbitration post, because the supply chain now had better corridor access. Small irony. Acknowledged it without making anything of it. Petra ate efficiently, as she always does, then set her fork down, looked at me with the direct undecorated attention she uses when something matters enough to warrant the trip. Node 7 is degrading faster than projected. Traffic volume through the pharmaceutical corridor is running 40% above our usage models. We need either an upgrade to the existing node or a second unit in that sector. Add the second unit. That's what I expected you to say. I need authorization and a budget allocation from your office. Send the specs to Owen. He'll process us the authorization this week. She nodded, looked at me a moment longer than the logistics required. Are you doing all right? The question had weight behind it that the words themselves didn't carry. Petra had known me for 9 years. She was the one who sent the message that read "It's ready." She'd been awake for 31 consecutive hours. On the day of the first vote, monitoring 47s from a station, 4 light minutes from the chamber, waiting to receive a single word back from me. She understood precisely what we had built and what it had taken, and what the second vote had and had not resolved. I'm working. She accepted that answer without adjusting it. Petra has always understood the difference between an answer and a navigation around one. And she has always recognized when the navigation is itself the more honest thing. The team would like to know if you're coming to the lab when you're next back on Earth. When I'm next back, tell them to assume yes. Tell them I said hello. She left the next morning. Watched her pod disconnect from the station bay, move into the departure corridor. Stood at the bay window for another few seconds after it was gone. Then went back to work.